What we're doing here is a little bit of R&D work. We're playing around with some other botanicals for possibly future gens. What we're doing here today is California bay leaf. So I'm doing the individual botanicals by themselves just to get familiar with them and understand what their flavor profile is. In here we've got our 6 times distilled, basically it's our what we call a neutral spirit. But in this case we're adding the botanicals right into the still. We do what's called a maceration method, which means that we're going to put the botanicals directly into the spirit and put that into the still. And right now we're letting the column come to equilibrium here. So that's allowing the vapors that are traveling upward, condensing, and then traveling back downward. And so what you're seeing is that condensate running down, we've got vapors rising up. The whole key concept of distilling is to separate flavors and aromas. That's what distillation does. And so you can take and break apart something that seems like one flavor is actually a complex amalgam of all kinds of different flavors. But how much you separate these compounds out and what you remove, what you keep, are all part of the art of distilling. And then what we'll be doing is exploring those flavors that have now been separated as we've separated in the column. As they begin to come out here in the parrot, we can begin to examine those flavors and what flavors this particular botanical brings and what its whole entire flavor profile looks like. And then we can begin to decide where we want to include and where we want to discard different portions of that flavor profile. And so we can just begin to examine here just by taste, do a little bit by smell. A lot of distilling has to do with the smells. It's the first time I've done the California bay leaf, so I don't really know what to expect. This is a trial run. This is why I have a nice small R&D still here. We can do these little runs and kind of get familiar with the botanicals. That's one of the reasons I'm doing it by itself, is I like to isolate them, examine them by themselves, and then we'll eventually put them together into a compound with other botanicals to create the gin. So I'm always looking for botanicals or wines or things like that that have wonderful aromas, because that's really what we're doing, is we're accelerating that evaporation. So those things that evaporate off that have a pleasant odor to them are a lot of the compounds that we're going to end up catching, especially the early on compounds. A lot of what I do is kind of go through systematically and look at almost any botanical that I think has a good potential for incorporating into a gin recipe. The liquor's in the blood, if you will. I was a home brewer for years and then kind of eventually transitioned into an interest in distilling, and just a passion for distilled spirits is what kind of drugged me back into the family business. So the Cutler family got started in California liquor going back to the early 1900s. It all started with my great-grandfather over here. His name was Duke Cutler. He was born in a small town called Angels Camp, which is a gold mining town a little southeast of Sacramento. He tried to start a bar in the early 1900s. Unfortunately, that's right about the time that the gold mines there in Angels Camp began to dry up. And so he moved a little southwest of there to a small town called Oakdale, California, and opened a small bar there, and then actually ended up closing it down briefly to volunteer to go off to war in World War I. He was an infantryman, made it back to the States, and when he got healthy again, he reopened his bar. Unfortunately, right about that time is when Prohibition hit in 1920. Rather than closing up the shop, he turned it into a hunters club and began having his buddies come by and continued to serve his liquor. The governor of California used to come through and buy liquor from him, of course, local sheriffs and judges. He used to warn him when the federal agents were coming into town. Each time I'm tasting it, the flavor is changing a little bit. Typically the lighter compounds, the more aromatic ones, are going to come off earlier on. The heavier, deeper, richer tones tend to come off a little bit later because they're heavier compounds. I'm starting to pick up a little bit more spicier notes. That intensity of that bay leaf is coming on a little bit stronger. If I'm combining this with certain other botanicals, that maybe I want some of that spiciness, and so I may want to let the collection run a little bit longer to capture a little bit more of that, say, spiciness in there. Basically, I'm familiarizing myself. I'm getting to know this botanical. So we'll do a couple of runs like this just to familiarize myself with it. And so that as I go to try and build future gens, I have this profile. I can say, okay, well, I'm looking for, this combination of different flavors is missing this. And if I know how bay leaf reacts and how it distills, I can say, oh, well, that would be a perfect addition with these other botanicals to create a new gen. We've been open here about 4 years at Cutler's Distillery. In Santa Barbara, we've got a number of just fantastic breweries. We've got a great one next door. We've got wonderful wineries. We're surrounded here in the Funk Zone by about 23 different wine tasting rooms. But we really don't have a lot in terms of distilled spirits. So I found that kind of interesting, that I would be able to bring that to the local area and provide folks with top quality, locally made spirits where when people come in, they can actually visit the place where their spirits are made. They get to meet me quite often. If you have a local brewery or local winery, people can really call that their own. That's my hometown brewery or winery, and I want to focus on that and really bring that to Santa Barbara area here with the distillery. My grandfather, Bob, joined in the family business in the mid-40s when he returned from the war. He was a B-17 bomber pilot in World War II. So Duke and Bob started a line of spirits in the mid to late 40s. The wings in my logo are actually a tribute to Bob being a pilot in World War II. They had a few different whiskeys. They imported some whiskeys. They had vodka. They had gin. My father joined in the mid to early 70s. Everything ran through about the mid 80s or so and shut down. We were a small, liquor store brand owners back in the day. That got kind of pushed away when the Walmart effect, if you will, the big box store kind of came about. That was novel and new, and so people tended to drift away from local craft things to more unified products. People tired of that over time, and I think that's part of what we're seeing today. Is definitely we're seeing a resurgence of folks wanting to go local, going back to a local brewery, going back to a local distillery, having things made locally, especially that tries to incorporate a little bit more of your local sensibilities. I think people were missing for many years, and they're now coming back to that. It's a passion, it's a desire, I guess, to see quality products and provide people with quality products and provide them with a local quality product. What I really want out of this is I want, like I said, locals to feel as if they, own a part of Cutler's. I want them to feel like, hey, that's my distillery. Having your own, local establishment, I think means a great deal.